Hi, and welcome to the I Teed Myself podcast. My name is Matthew Miniman, and this is episode 112. What can nerve blocks teach us about blinding attacks? So, nerve blocks, if you have never had to have surgery, or you're not a woman and had an epidural, or had a significant nerve pain, or something like that, you've probably never had to experience a nerve block. But if you've ever had like Novocaine or cavity fillings or things like that given to you, you probably know what the sensation feels like. Basically, what a nerve block does is it prevents the brain from receiving signals of pain and sensation from a particular region of the body. It usually does this by inhibiting the flow of electric current to the nerve while still allowing blood flow to go to that specific portion of the body. The good news is that this alleviates a significant amount of pain. So if you have a surgery or, you're in labor, you can basically avoid all of the fucking pain that you could ever have by simply having a nerve block. It's a local anesthetic, meaning you don't need to be put asleep to be issued it. And it's simply done through injection, although there are some ways to do it through medication, things like that. So even topically, you could consider like not a Novocaine, but I'm trying to think of what that was, lidocaine. You could probably consider lidocaine to be a specific nerve blocker, nerve agent that prevents you from feeling things. So, there are good things and bad things with it. Specifically, if you have a nerve block that lasts for a long time, like an epidural or a targeted nerve block, the risks it's not that there are no risks, it's that the risks are definitely outweighed by the benefit of not having to feel the pain. But you can suffer some nerve damage because of a nerve block, depending on how it's issued. And if your anesthesiologist, whoever is issuing it, doesn't necessarily know what they're doing, looking at you, acupuncture. Anyway, the whole point of a nerve block is to get rid of that pain. But some of the other things that can happen with a nerve block are things like, because you can't feel the pain because there's no sensation, and you typically can't control the region of the body that's been targeted by the nerve block, the issue is that you could hurt yourself even further. So, for instance, if you've ever had a Novocaine injection for like a tooth filling or oral dental work, you probably notice that your entire mouth goes numb and potentially your tongue will go numb, and they tell you not to eat. And that's not because you can't swallow, it's because you might bite your tongue off and not just realize it. That's legitimate concern with Novocaine and that numbness that you feel. And it's the same thing with any other like regional nerve block, like an epidural for labor. You lose the ability to use your legs. You can't walk. And so if you try to stand up and move with an epidural in, you're just going to fall flat on your face. Your legs won't respond. And that can be a scary feeling. But you can also do some significant damage to yourself. You can crack your skull, break a bone, so on and so forth, sue the hospital. And this is why we have the sticky socks on the bottom of every pair of hospital socks. Sticky bottoms. Like we're going to a trampoline park. Anyway, what does this have to do with blinding attacks? What does this have to do with cybersecurity at all? Well, with logging and aggregation and identifying activity, alerting, whatever, that's all kind of the basis of cybersecurity. It's kind of base number one. How can I know what's going on in my environment if I can't see what's going on? I have to know that my logs are coming in. I have to trust that those logs are accurate and that they are continually flowing. And if I am attacked by a blinding attack, this can prevent me from seeing that activity. This can prevent me from seeing malicious activity or potentially malicious activity. And it's a hazard. It's something that we need to be cognizant of as security practitioners. And what we mean by this when we go through a blinding attack is that there's a couple of ways that blinding attacks can affect us. One, the logs just stop. We've been blinded from the logs because the logs are no longer flowing through to the SIEM solution. Either the source has stopped sending logs, or the destination has stopped receiving logs, or there's some sort of inhibitor somewhere in between, like a nerve block. And that's definitely a problem, and one that you can craft around as the security practitioner. You should always have something that monitors the flow of logs into your organization, for not only for regions of your business, but for critical devices, and have a separate alert flow up when, hey, this is not feeding logs anymore. We need to know what is going on, investigate immediately. Things like that. So, that's one kind of blinding attack, where you are basically removing the entirety of the logs from the source to your SIEM solution, to your log aggregation, to your SOAR, whatever it is. You're no longer seeing those logs. The other type of blinding attack is the other one that's a little bit more insidious and is definitely easier for an attacker to perform remotely without access to your environment. And that is adding enough noise to your environment so that it is difficult to tell what is actually getting through and what isn't. This is the specific type of blinding attack that can be recognized in a few different ways. There are permutations of it depending on the type of environment or the type of attack that is going on, such as a Christmas tree attack or a SYN flood attack. Those are definitely attacks that can occur that can blind you from what is really going on, because there's just so much activity that it's impossible for you and the system to identify the logs that are happening. And this is another one of those things that you definitely have to be aware of and alert for, and identify a way to practice around. And so, there's a couple of methodologies to deal with that. One is, we need an alert when we start hitting a high level of logs in a short amount of time. We need to have some way to ensure that our log aggregation is load balanced. That way we can reduce the potential for a flood attack to blind us to those alerts, so on and so forth. So there's a few different methodologies. And as you're planning your alerting framework, your alerting environment, and your logging environment, those are things to think through. Definitely set your environment up so that you can identify when logs are being sent in at too high of a pace, and when they aren't being sent at all. Identify your minimum level of log activity, and definitely place that minimum as a threshold for your logs to hit, or else you start getting flatline alerts, things like that. If you have a SIEM environment, these are kind of basics that you should set up as kind of square one before you get into the more advanced alerting techniques and methodologies. Because as a SIEM platform, as a log aggregation platform, you should be first trying to identify when the logs aren't flowing, and when you need to step in as an administrator and identify why those logs are no longer flowing. Because again, without those logs, without the information in front of us, how can we know? How can we know what is going on with our systems if we're not receiving those logs? It is very painful to have to go into logs, to check logs manually for each and every server that you have, and it can be unsustainable. It does not scale. If you are like Delta and you have 40,000 different servers, and you need to look at each and every single log that occurs on every single system, oh my God, you're going to literally spend a year looking at every system before you can come back to the first system to look at the information. So log aggregation system that can identify the data that you're looking at, can quickly alert on it, can categorize it, and tell you the criticality of events that are flowing through. That is key. You do need to have a SIEM, and you do need to have something that can alert you on that, but you need to make sure that you craft your SIEM, your log aggregation, whatever it may be, whatever you're calling it, make sure that you are crafting it in such a way that you are getting alerted when there are events, when there are missing logs, when logs stop appearing. And this isn't just a problem with the SIM, with a SIM, with a SOAR, with any of that. It can also be a problem internally to the system. As I said, another one of the types of attacks that can occur is that the system itself can stop sending logs. And Microsoft actually has a known vulnerability right now that's been out for over a year, where an attacker can simply, they can effectively shut down the logging system in Windows without administrative control. They can just issue a specific command as a user that causes the logging platform, Windows Event Logs, to crash, and you are no longer receiving Windows Event Logs at all. This is something that Microsoft's known about for a year, has chosen not to do anything about. Currently, the only patch for this is a patch from a unlicensed source or a unofficial source. I believe the company that is doing this is Patch Zero. It's not that they're bad guys, and it's not that I believe that they're potentially malicious. They're just not trusted. We can't inherently trust them because they aren't Microsoft. Not that you necessarily should inherently trust Microsoft either, but here we are. Anyway, whole point being throughout all of this is that as you design your log aggregation system, take these things into account. Make sure you plan on this. Make sure you plan on how you're going to tell when logs stop flowing and what you're going to do. Make sure there are processes and procedures in place for when logs stop flowing so that you can get them flowing again and you can get alerted on when events occur. On top of that, make sure you have some sort of redundancy protocol to where logs that get missed or are avoided get recorded into the SIM at some point. So if the logs get recorded, make sure that there's a methodology for those logs to make their way into the SIM at the end of the day. It doesn't matter if it's a batch, it doesn't matter if it's hard transfer or whatever. Just make sure that they have some methodology of, hey, the logging aggregation system failed at some point, and these logs will get into there no matter what. And so that is pretty much it, guys. That's log aggregation, being blinded by logs, being blinded by nerve blocks. If you don't do this, you'll feel the pain. You'll feel the pain of a breach pretty quickly, because without logs, how are you going to tell what's going on in your system? And if you can't tell what's going on in your system, how can you know where and what hurts? And I hope you all have a great day.